The house was so cold I could see my own breath. I had stopped noticing it after the second week. When you sit long enough in a room where the heat has been off, you stop feeling it as cold and start feeling it as normal. You wrap a blanket tighter. You make smaller cups of tea just to hold something warm. You tell yourself it is temporary. My son said the technician was coming. He said that every Tuesday for a month and a half. I was sitting in my armchair near the window, still in my coat, when my daughter pushed open the front door. She had not called ahead. She told me later that she had tried 3 times, and my phone went to voicemail. She said something in her chest, told her not to wait. She stepped inside, and the first thing she did was stop walking. She looked at me in my coat. She looked at the cold air between us. She looked at the kitchen counter, which held a single sleeve of crackers and a jar of peanut butter. Then she looked back at me, and her face did something I had never seen it do before. It did not crumple. It did not go soft. It went very, very still. "Mom," she said quietly, "why are you wearing your coat inside the house?" I opened my mouth. I had an answer ready. I always had an answer ready. The technician is coming. It has only been a few weeks. It is not so bad once you get used to it. But when I looked at my daughter standing there with her overnight bag still on her shoulder and her eyes going slowly around my living room, all those ready answers felt like what they were. Small, careful lies I had been telling myself to keep the peace. "The heater has been broken since January," I said. She set her bag down on the floor very slowly. "I'm 67 years old. I taught high school English for 31 years. I raised 2 children in this house. I watched my husband take his last breath in the bedroom down the hall, and I sat with that grief until it softened into something I could carry. I am not a woman who frightens easily, but that night, watching my daughter's jaw tighten and her eyes fill with something sharper than tears, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. I felt seen, and seeing felt frightening, because it meant everything I had been hiding was now visible. She walked to the thermostat. She pressed the buttons. Nothing happened. She opened the refrigerator, and the light came on, but the shelves held almost nothing. A half-empty bottle of juice, 1 egg, a container of margarine. She closed it slowly and turned to face me. "You get $8,500 a month, Mom," she said carefully, "and there is 1 egg in your refrigerator." Before I could answer, the back door opened and my daughter-in-law walked in. She had a key. She had always had a key. When my husband passed 18 months ago, my son said it would be easier if they could check on me. He said I should not be alone. He said family takes care of family. He stood at that kitchen table and held my hands and said, "Mom, just let us help you. You have enough to think about." My daughter-in-law stopped when she saw my daughter. Her expression shifted quickly, the way weather changes when a front moves in fast. "Claire," she said smoothly, "we did not know you were coming." My daughter did not return the greeting. "Why is the heat off in this house?" My daughter-in-law set her purse on the counter. "We have a technician scheduled. These things take time to arrange. The right people are not always available immediately." "It is February," my daughter said. My daughter-in-law smiled carefully. "Your mother is comfortable. She has blankets. We check on her regularly." My daughter looked at me once more. Then she walked to the kitchen table and pulled out a chair and sat down. She placed her hands flat on the table. She was not going anywhere. "Mom," she said, "tell me exactly what has been happening with your finances." This was the question I had been both dreading and waiting for someone to ask for 8 months. I looked at my daughter-in-law. Her face was pleasant and composed, but her eyes were doing something different. They were watching me the way a person watches a door they are not sure is locked. I looked back at my daughter. "I am not sure," I said slowly. I stopped seeing the statements. The room felt like it changed temperature. My daughter-in-law laughed lightly. "Helen, you asked me to handle the paperwork. You said it was overwhelming. Do you not remember that conversation?" I did remember a conversation. I remembered many conversations, actually. Soft, reassuring conversations at this same kitchen table, where my daughter-in-law spread papers in front of me and explained things in a voice that was kind and fast at the same time. She had a way of explaining things that made you feel like you understood while you were listening, and then left you uncertain the moment she left the room. "I remember signing papers," I said. "I do not remember agreeing to stop seeing my own account." My daughter had been listening with her eyes on the table. Now she raised them. "What papers did you sign, Mom?" I told her what I knew. "After my husband died, My son came to me and said that managing finances alone was a burden no one should carry while grieving. He said my daughter-in-law worked in financial planning. He said she understood how to structure retirement accounts and manage estate transfers. He said he had spoken to an advisor named Richard Holt, who had helped them before, and that Richard had suggested consolidating oversight to reduce my administrative load. I remembered those words exactly. Administrative load. It had sounded professional. It had sounded kind. I signed what they put in front of me 2 weeks after my husband's funeral. I was not thinking clearly. I do not think anyone is. 2 weeks after, my daughter-in-law's voice became gentler. Helen, we have been managing things responsibly. Your bills are paid. You have a roof over your head. She has 1 egg, my daughter said. Silence. And a coat, my daughter added. Inside her own house. In February, my daughter-in-law picked up her purse. I can see this is going to be an emotional conversation. I think we should all take a breath and speak with Kevin before making any decisions. My daughter looked at her. What decisions? I am just asking my mother a question. My daughter-in-law smiled once more and said she would call my son and that everything would be clearer in the morning. She walked to the back door and let herself out the same way she had come in. The moment the door closed, my daughter got up and turned the deadbolt. Then she came and sat across from me and took both my hands in hers. They were warm. I had forgotten what warm hands felt like. Mom, she said, I need you to tell me everything. Start from when Dad passed. So I did. I told her about the life insurance policy. My husband had maintained it for 22 years. When he died, it paid out $200,000. My son came to me within the first month and said that leaving that amount in a standard account was wasteful. He said Richard Holt had identified a structured investment vehicle that would grow the principal while protecting it. He said it was what Dad would have wanted. Dad always talked about leaving something for the grandchildren. I told her about the pension. I receive $8,500 every month from my state teacher's retirement fund. It is reliable. It has always been reliable. After I signed the papers my son brought, I stopped receiving paper statements. My son said they were digitized. When I asked to see the online account, my daughter-in-law said she would walk me through it next time she visited. She visited regularly, but somehow we never got around to it. There was always something more immediate. A grandchild's recital, a family dinner, a small crisis with the car. I told her about the heater. I had asked my son in December to arrange the repair. He said he would handle it. I asked again in January. He said the part was on order. I had $19 in cash in my purse. I had not had more than $50 at one time in 4 months. When I asked for cash, I called my son. He or my daughter-in-law would stop by with an envelope. $60, $80, enough for a few groceries and nothing else. My daughter listened to all of this without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she went to her bag and took out her laptop. I watched her search for something. Her face told me what she found before her words did. Mum, she said, what do you know about Richard Holt? I told her what I had been told. A financial advisor with 30 years of experience. Someone my son trusted completely. Someone who had restructured several family accounts in our area. My daughter turned the laptop toward me. The article was from a regional business journal, dated 14 months ago. Richard Holt had been the subject of an informal review by a financial regulatory body. The review was related to advising elderly clients to transfer retirement assets into private investment vehicles with low disclosure requirements. The review was described as ongoing. I stared at the screen for a long time. My daughter closed the laptop gently. Mom, she said, we are going to the bank tomorrow morning. I nodded. But something else was turning over in my mind. Something I had not told her yet because I had not understood it until this moment. 2 weeks before my daughter arrived, my son had come to the house alone. Not with my daughter-in-law. Alone. He sat at this table, and he was quiet in a way that was different from his usual quiet. He asked me if I had ever updated the beneficiary on any of my accounts. I said I did not know. He said it might be worth reviewing. He said families went through changes, and paperwork needed to reflect current realities. I had not thought much about it then. I thought about it now. I told my daughter what he had said. She was very still for a moment. What kind of changes? She asked. Did he say? I shook my head. She looked at the table and then looked at me. Mum, I'm going to ask you something and I need you to think carefully. Has anything seemed different between Kevin and Sandra lately? Have they seemed tense with each other? Have you noticed anything? I thought about the last 3 family dinners. The way my daughter-in-law had gotten up to refill her glass more than once. The way my son sat at the end of the table and scrolled through his phone. The way they arrived in separate cars to Thanksgiving. I thought it was work stress, I said. My daughter exhaled slowly. I think there may be more happening here than just the money, she said carefully. We did not sleep well that night. My daughter ordered groceries delivered and heated soup on the stove, and we sat together in the kitchen with the burners on because the oven made the room warmer. She called a space heater in from the garage and plugged it in beside my armchair. Small things. But they felt enormous. Before I went to bed, I reached into the drawer of my nightstand and took out my husband's watch. He had worn it every day for 40 years. A plain silver watch with a worn leather band. When he died, I cleaned it and placed it in the drawer and told myself I was not ready to look at it yet. I held it in my hand that night, and I thought about what he would have said. He was not a man who raised his voice. He was a man who asked one question at a time and waited until he had an answer before asking the next one. He had a patience that looked like stillness, but was actually something much stronger. I placed the watch on the nightstand where I could see it and fell asleep looking at it. In the morning, my son arrived before we left for the bank. He had not called ahead either. He knocked at the front door, which he had never done before because he had always used his key. When my daughter let him in, I saw immediately that my daughter-in-law was not with him. He looked at me, and then at the space heater, and then at the groceries on the counter, and something in his face shifted. Not guilt. Exactly. Calculation. The small, quick recalibration of someone who has walked into a room that is different from what they expected. "Mum," he said, "I heard you had a rough night." "She had a cold house," my daughter said from the doorway. My son looked at her carefully. "The technician is coming Friday." "It is Wednesday," my daughter said. "She has been cold since January." He sat down at the table as if he had been invited to. My son has always done that. He assumes welcome. I used to think it was confidence. Now I wondered if it was something else. "We have been managing a lot," he said to me. Dad's estate was more complex than anyone knew. There were overlapping accounts. Richard had a system for organizing everything. It was supposed to simplify things. "Simplify," my daughter repeated. "Investment structures take time to mature. The money is not gone. It is working." My daughter crossed her arms. "Then you will not mind showing us exactly where it is working." He looked at me with an expression I recognized from when he was a child and had done something wrong and had already decided how he was going to explain it. It was a look that combined apology with persuasion. "Mom," he said, "do you trust me?" There it was. The question that had been keeping me in a cold house for 6 weeks. I looked at my husband's watch on the nightstand, just visible through the bedroom door. I looked at my son. "I trusted you," I said. "But trust is not the same as giving up the right to see my own money." He was quiet for a moment. "If we go to the bank," he said slowly, "there are things that will be complicated. Some of the fund structures are under review. If the accounts are flagged, it could affect the whole arrangement." My daughter said, "What arrangement?" He did not answer. She stepped closer to him. "Kevin." "What arrangement?" He looked at his hands. Then he said something I had not expected. "Sandra and I are separating," he said quietly. The room was silent. He looked up. His eyes were tired in a way I had not noticed before. "It has been in process for 6 months. The legal filings start next month. I needed to make sure certain assets were protected before everything went through discovery." My daughter took a slow breath. "Protected from Sandra?" He nodded. "By moving them into accounts connected to Mom." Another nod. Smaller this time. I felt something cold move through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. "So I was not just a widow you were helping," I said. "I was a place to put things." He flinched. "Kevin." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Did you use the life insurance money your father left me to protect your own assets from your wife's divorce attorney?" He rubbed his face with both hands. "It was not supposed to be permanent. Once everything settled, once the business interest was separated from the marital estate, everything would go back. Richard said it was a standard asset protection strategy." My daughter walked to the front door and opened it. She looked at him with an expression that reminded me, very specifically, of her father. "Get out," she said. He stood up slowly. "Claire, Let me explain the full picture. There are legal implications if we do not handle this carefully. If Richard's accounts come under scrutiny. Get out of our mother's house, she said again. Right now. He left. He did not argue. I think he had known this was coming from the moment he saw the groceries on the counter. My daughter closed the door. She stood with her back to it for a moment. Then she turned and looked at me. Mom, I need you to tell me that you want to fix this. Not for me. Not for Dad's memory. For you. I thought about 31 years in a classroom. I thought about the year I taught summer school to earn money for my son's college application fees. I thought about the overtime shifts at the end of every semester, grading papers at the kitchen table until midnight so I could save enough to give my children a different kind of life than I had. I thought about $200,000 that my husband spent decades building so that I would be safe. I want to fix this, I said. All of it. My daughter picked up her keys. The bank branch manager was a woman about my daughter's age, professional and direct. When my daughter explained what we were there for, the manager did not waste time. She pulled up my accounts, and her expression shifted almost immediately. She excused herself briefly and returned with a colleague. In the past 17 months, $196,000 had been transferred out of my life insurance settlement account into a private investment vehicle managed through an LLC connected to Richard Holt. The transfers had been authorized through the power of attorney document I signed 2 weeks after my husband's funeral. Each transfer was marked as a structured investment allocation. My monthly pension of $8,500 had been redirected into an operating account, from which automatic withdrawals sent $7,200 each month into the same investment vehicle. The remaining $1,300 covered my utilities and basic bills. Nothing had been going directly to me. I sat in that small office and listened to the numbers and felt the room tilt very slightly. The current balance in my personal checking account was $43. My daughter asked clearly. Under the power of attorney she signed. Were these transfers legal? The manager explained that a power of attorney grants authority to manage finances on behalf of the grantor, but that authority must be exercised in the best interest of the grantor. Systematic transfers to a third-party investment vehicle that reduced the grantor to $43 in personal funds while leaving her without heat or food would likely not meet that standard. She said the words financial exploitation carefully and then said them again. My daughter asked about the investment vehicle. The manager said that Richard Holt's LLC had been flagged in a regional advisory watch list 8 months ago. She said she would need to escalate internally and that she strongly recommended we consult an independent elder law attorney. She said one more thing before we stood to leave. Mrs. Collins, she said, looking at me. A power of attorney can be revoked at any time, as long as you are of sound mind. You do not need anyone's permission. You only need to sign a revocation document in front of a notary. I had not known that. I do not think I was supposed to know that. We called an attorney from the bank parking lot. He was a referral from the branch manager, someone who specialized in elder financial law. He agreed to meet us at my house that afternoon. On the drive home, my son called twice. I let it ring. My daughter-in-law called once. I watched the name on the screen and let that ring too. When we pulled into my driveway, I noticed something wrong immediately. The front door was unlocked. My daughter put her hand on my arm. Did you leave it open? I shook my head. She told me to stay by the car. I did not stay by the car. I followed her to the door because she was my child, and I had spent 31 years not being the kind of person who stood at the side while something needed to be handled. The living room looked undisturbed at first. Then I saw the desk. The top drawer was open. The folder where I kept insurance documents and the deed to the house was missing. My daughter checked the bedroom. My jewelry box had been moved. The watch was still on the nightstand. Nothing appeared taken, but things had been handled. On the kitchen table was a piece of paper folded in half with my name on it. Not my full name, just Mum. My daughter opened it. It said, "Let Richard handle this. There is more at stake than you understand. Please do not make this bigger than it needs to be." My daughter set the paper down flat and photographed it with her phone. Then she called the police. 2 officers came within 20 minutes. They noted the point of entry was the back door, which showed no force damage. The lock was intact. Someone had used a key. My son had a key. My daughter-in-law had a key. And, I realized slowly, My son had given a third key to a contractor for an estimate on the back porch nearly a year ago. He said the contractor was a colleague of Richard's. One of the officers asked if I wanted to file a formal report. I said yes. The attorney arrived while the officers were still there. He reviewed the power of attorney document I had signed, cross-referenced it with the bank transfer records my daughter had photographed on her phone, and within 45 minutes he had a clear assessment. The transfers, he said, exceeded the reasonable scope of the authority granted. The document I had signed authorized my son to manage my finances on my behalf, not to redirect substantially all of my income and savings into a private vehicle connected to a third party with a pending regulatory review. He said that using a vulnerable adult's assets as a sheltering mechanism during divorce proceedings was a serious matter under state elder financial abuse statutes. He asked me if I wanted to proceed. I picked up my husband's watch from the nightstand where I had carried it that morning. I had slipped it into my coat pocket when we left for the bank. I did not know why, until now. I held it and thought about the man who wore it for 40 years, who asked one question at a time, who was patient in a way that looked like stillness. He would have asked one question right now. "What do you want, Helen?" "I want my accounts restored," I said. "I want the power of attorney revoked immediately, and I want Richard Holt investigated." The attorney nodded and began preparing documents. My son arrived an hour later. He had not been invited. He knocked at the front door again, which meant he no longer assumed welcome. That was something. The attorney answered the door. My son saw him and stopped on the porch. "We are in the middle of a formal legal process," the attorney said. "If you would like to have counsel present, I recommend you arrange that before entering." My son looked past him at me. I was sitting at the kitchen table in the warm room because my daughter had replaced the space heater with a second one from the garage, and together they had finally moved the air from cold to something approaching comfortable. "Mum," he said. "Please." I looked at him carefully. Not the way I had looked at him for the past 18 months, with the careful, sideways look that avoids things. Directly. "Did you know when you had me sign those papers that they would be used to protect your assets in a divorce?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. "Not exactly," he said. "Richard said it was standard estate planning. He said if anything happened legally in the future, having things structured this way would be cleaner." I did not ask what he meant by legally. I should have. "You let me sit in a cold house for 6 weeks," I said. His face did something then. Not calculation. Not persuasion. Something that looked like the face of the child I had raised, standing in a kitchen he had made a mess of, and understanding that the mess was real and that he was the one who made it. "I know," he said. "Do you know why I did not say anything for 6 weeks?" He shook his head. "Because I was protecting you," I said. "Even then. Even when I was cold and had nothing in the refrigerator. I was still trying to keep the family together by staying quiet." His eyes filled. "Silence is not loyalty," I said. "I learned that the hard way." He asked to come inside. The attorney let him in. My daughter stayed at the table. She did not hug him. She did not speak to him. She kept her hands flat on the table and watched. My son sat across from me and told me the rest. The separation from his wife had been in progress since spring. Richard Holt had been his financial advisor for 3 years and had genuinely, at first, helped manage several accounts. When the marriage began dissolving, Richard had suggested a restructuring strategy that placed assets in accounts connected to family members, which would make them difficult to include in marital asset discovery. My son had understood this was aggressive. He had done it anyway because he was afraid of losing everything he had built. "What did you build?" my daughter asked quietly. "You built it with Mum's money." He did not argue that. "The life insurance money," he said, "was supposed to stay in the investment vehicle and grow. He had intended to transfer it back before I ever needed it. He had told himself I was comfortable. He had told himself the small cash envelopes were enough. He had not come to my house in winter and felt the cold air. He had not opened my refrigerator. "You did not come," my daughter said, "because you did not want to see it." He nodded. In the weeks that followed, things moved quickly once the legal process was in motion. Richard Holt's LLC was frozen, pending a formal regulatory investigation. Several other families had been connected to the same investment vehicle, most of them elderly, most of them with estates recently transferred into the same kind of paperwork I had signed. The regional financial authority took over the case within 10 days. My son met with his own attorney and agreed to full cooperation with the bank investigation. The funds that had been transferred through the LLC were traceable and partially recoverable. The investigation determined that Richard Holt had been skimming management fees above the disclosed rate and had used the pooled assets to support a separate investment position that was failing. My son had not known the full scope, but not knowing the full scope when warning signs were available did not fully excuse the damage done. The lender that had a claim connected to my accounts agreed to release it once the full investigation was documented. The power of attorney was revoked and my accounts were placed under direct individual access with a financial oversight monitor from an independent elder services organization, someone who reported to me and no one else. My daughter-in-law, it turned out, had known about the asset transfers for approximately 4 months. She had said nothing because she expected to benefit from them indirectly once the divorce was finalized. When the investigation began, she cooperated fully in exchange for reduced personal liability. She and my son filed their separation papers in March. The day my direct access to my pension account was restored, I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the first statement I had seen in 17 months. $8,500. Deposited. Available. I had spent 31 years earning that number. I had earned it in the early mornings before my children woke up, and in the late nights after they went to sleep, and in every summer session, and every overtime grade, and every year I renewed my certification because I believed that what I did mattered, and because I intended to be safe when I was done. My daughter sat across from me. The kitchen was warm. The refrigerator was full. The heater had been repaired by a technician I hired myself on the first day I had access to my own account. She reached across the table and placed something in front of me. It was a small frame. Inside it, she had put a photograph of my husband at the kitchen table, the worn silver watch visible on his wrist. She had found the photograph in the folder my son had taken and returned. He would have asked one question, my daughter said. I know, I said. He would have asked what I wanted. She nodded. I looked at the statement on the screen. I looked at the photograph. I thought about the woman who had sat in that armchair in January in her coat, quietly making herself smaller and smaller so that everyone around her could stay comfortable. I did not want to be that woman anymore. There are things I know now that I did not know when I signed those papers. I know that a power of attorney can be revoked at any time, as long as you are of sound mind. I know that anyone managing your finances under that authority must act in your interest, not their own. I know that the words family and protection are not the same as accountability and transparency. I know that staying quiet is sometimes the loneliest thing a person can do. I also know this. The bravest sentence I ever said in that house had only 7 words. I want to see my own account. 7 words. And they changed everything. My son calls once a week now. The conversations are shorter and more honest than any we had when everything was fine on the surface. He is rebuilding his business with his own money. It is slower. It is real. He brought me a plant last month, a small one in a terracotta pot. He set it on my kitchen windowsill without being asked, and said he thought the room needed some color. I said I agreed. We are not where we were. I do not know if we will ever be exactly where we were, but I think what we are building now is sturdier, because it is built on what is true instead of what is convenient. The watch is on my wrist now. I had the band replaced. It fits well. I walk through my warm house in the morning and I think about the woman sitting in the cold and I want to say something to her across the months that separate us. I want to say that the darkness felt permanent because no one had turned the light back on yet. Not because the light was gone. If you are listening to this and you have ever made yourself smaller so that someone else could stay comfortable, I want you to hear this. Your comfort matters. Your safety matters. Your name on your own account matters. And if someone has been managing your trust the way my son managed mine, the bravest thing you will ever do is simply ask to see the numbers, not because money is everything, but because what the numbers tell you is whether the people who say they love you are acting like it. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone you love or something you have been afraid to say out loud, please share it. Leave a comment. Let someone who needs to hear it find it. Because sometimes the most important stories are the ones that tell the truth about quiet rooms and cold houses and the people inside them who deserve so much more than silence.